Screw expectations. Hey ladies, I am back and today I'm super excited because today I have an interview for you. I have an interview for you with Dr. Agnes Wainman. And a little bio about Dr. Agnes. So Dr. Agnes Wainman is a registered psychologist. Oh gosh. A registered psychologist who works with overwhelmed, worried women. And these incredible women have taught her that it is not us that are broken, but rather that we are trying to meet expectations that are making us sick, miserable, and plain fed up. Her mission is to help women screw these expectations and create a life that feels authentic, aligned, and amazing. So Agnes and I connected, when? May, maybe? And we actually only live a few hours from each other, and we didn't even know that. And we went on a retreat together in Tofino, BC, and with some amazing women, and we just connected. And it's amazing when you find your tribe, when you find your people, because you're all singing the same song and dance. You have very similar beliefs and values to how you live your life and how you go about in the world. And here's the thing. We individually find our own path, and then we find our people. And that's the whole concept of like attracts like. And today, Agnes and I, or Dr. Agnes and I, talk about how to make friends as adults. I said, oh my gosh, I want to interview you for the podcast. What should we talk about? And she said, I work with so many women who talk about their frustration of making friends when they're older. And I thought this was a really, really good episode to have because I know too often people say that to me as well, that we have this sense of loneliness and isolation. And in our current culture, the village mentality is gone. The collaboration mentality is gone. And even though, consciously you try to bring it back, like I've tried to bring that back consciously, the culture is just not set up for it. It's like you can't even, walk over to your neighbor's house without texting them first or drop off at your friend's house because you don't want to bug anyone or, during the day people are working or however that works out. So I'm really excited for you to have this conversation or to hear this conversation with Dr. Agnes and I. And you could check her out at screwexpectations.com. She's also on Instagram. And I just love her personality. And I'm excited for you to dive into this episode. So here we go. Agnes, you and I met a few weeks back at a retreat.
Yes.
And actually we met on the plane.
Yes.
We didn't know that we were only a few hours away. And this is what I love about like attracts like, right? When we're constantly, seeking community and support from other like-minded women or people that we just want to know we're not alone in the world. Sometimes we don't realize that they're just a few hours or in our backyard. And once we got talking, I'm like, I really want to interview you. I like you. I love what you were about. And I love the fact that you're a little bit of a disruptor and you just want to, go outside of the box from everything that you've been learning and doing in your professional career. But we started talking about friendships and women developing friendships in their adult years. So we're going to talk about that. So welcome and let's dive in.
Yay. So I'm so happy to be here. And yes, and I think that's a good lead in to this whole talk about friendships is often it's not so complicated. We just have to put a little bit of action into it, like most things in life, that probably friends aren't just going to show up on your doorstep, unfortunately.
It's easy when you're in kindergarten to meet your bestie and your BFF for life, and then to go through school with these people. And I see it with my own kids. They're like, I don't have any friends. I'm like, you do have friends. You just aren't in all of the clubs and all of the things like everybody else. And when you're younger, typically it's sports related or some other activity related things or your school where you're meeting your friends. But then when you get older and life changes, again, we just expect them to show up. So what do you see? Like, why is this such an important part of, the work that you do and what you see in your personal practice?
Yeah. So friendships, particularly for women, are really, really important because, and again, I'm going to be throwing out a lot of overgeneralization. So anytime I do podcast interviews or put anything out there, I always give people permission. Take what applies, take what resonates. If it totally is not your experience, just you can leave it. That's okay. But over the years, I've definitely seen some trends, and the trends are actually supported by research as well. So women in heterosexual relationships, because that's who we typically research, we get some of our emotional needs met by our male partners, but a lot of those emotional needs are also met by female friends. Whereas for males in heterosexual relationships, the vast majority of their emotional needs are met by their female partners.
Interesting.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so that's a whole other conversation about the emotional labor women do in their relationships, because they're, again, primarily supporting they're being their partner's therapists and confidants and all of that. And yes, while he can do that in some ways, we do need those additional friendships to get our emotional needs met. So that's why friendships are really, really important.
So so my brain immediately goes back to women in community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the village mentality. It takes a village to raise a child. It takes it like we're supposed to have other women around us.
Absolutely. And I always go back to our inner cave woman. So I know you talk a lot about, our brain trying to keep us safe, our lizard brain trying to keep us alive and comfortable, and that same, inner cave woman, she needs her tribe, because as the men go hunt, we have our tribe to gather with, to raise children with, which again is a whole other conversation, is losing our support in our villages when we're raising children and then things go poorly. But we really need that group of women, and that group of women for you might be one or two. That group of women may be 5 or 6. So we also don't want to get stuck on this idea that we need like this huge group, because I think in our Facebook, how many friends do you have kind of culture, we often look at quantity versus the quality of the friendships in our life.
Okay. So this can be terrifying for women. I know for many women who come into my mastery program, it's very community based, where with anything else, it's what you put into it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I see some women like just perching on the outside and not like a lot of us have been burnt by female relationships. So we have a little PTSD. So what do we do then?
Yeah. So again, I think, yes, absolutely. Let's go back a little bit into childhood, which is where all of our shit starts. So we go off into JK or even earlier, preschool, daycare, and we have 2 ingredients for friendship, which is proximity and frequency. So we're close to other children and we see them every day, and for kids, that's pretty much enough to start a friendship. And then as, again, we get older, we start getting influenced by society and culture. And we have this expectation that we have to find that one bestie, like that one BFF, which again makes total sense because there's a certain safety and security of that one person who, again, we have the BFF necklace, you have the best and I have the friends, so I'm safe and I'm secure. When I'm away from my family, I have this other attachment figure. It's all going well until it doesn't. Until your BFF shows up and she's not wearing her half of the necklace.
And she's giving it away to somebody else.
Yes. Or she's wearing someone else's.
Yeah. So what is that about?
So, and again, there's also, and this is not my area of research, but I know there's tons out there about how, unfortunately, exclusion is the weapon that girls use against each other. And often it's because, like everything else, it's our behaviors are reflecting our own shit. So if we're feeling insecure, if we're feeling like we're not measuring up, if we're feeling, that maybe things aren't going well at home and we have to exert some level of control somewhere else, then we sometimes do that in our friendship circles.
So I see a lot of, can we talk about competition versus collaboration and judgment? Because in the adult world, I know in the personal development world, like I don't know what I don't want to say my issue, but I classify myself as a lone wolf. I do have an inner circle of friends. I'm like a minimalist when it comes to my friends. Like I have those really good friends. Some that I've only had for a few years and some I've had for a really long time. But I do see this culture of competition. Mm-hmm. And I know over the years, I'm sure I've had a sense of competition, but I just kind of retreated. I was like, I didn't need to be like, oh, I'm better than you. I'm better than you. But definitely self-judgment, right? So like, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm not at equal status with her or whatever. But now I don't want to say that there's this movement, but it's like lifting each other up, right? Collaboration. Like, what do you need? How can I be of service to you? And just giving without expectation, right? Screw those expectations. Screw them. Just giving without expectation to be of service to that other woman, from a place of like, we got to raise each other up. So where does this like come from, this whole competition thing?
Well, like most destructive, dysfunctional, unhealthy expectations from society, like as a society, we get so much wrong. Like I would argue like 80 to 90% of expectations that society has are totally wrong. They're destructive. They aren't actually based in how human beings function. Sorry, I get all ranty because this.
No, I just think that's really interesting because yeah, it's out of alignment. And I always tell people if something doesn't feel good, something needs to change. It could be a belief, it could be your thoughts, it could be an action, but you're supposed to feel good.
Yes. Like, so, and I think, this competition that we're even starting to see in like, 4 and 5-year-old little girls is, really from that place of scarcity, feeling like there's not enough, there's not enough attention. There's not enough love. There's not enough for us to go around. So the way I'm going to fill that need is by taking someone down.
Okay, so I can see this conversation going in many ways, but I know we really wanted to focus it because we could have a whole conversation around parenting in this.
Well, yeah.
I get that a lot from people like, how do I get my kids to fill in the blank, right? Or, I'm seeing this at school, or my daughter is experiencing this, or my son's experiencing this. So that's one thing. We're just going to push that conversation aside for a sec. But let's talk about adults because, we really want, as parents, we really, really want to focus on the kids, but we have to understand that they're having their own like human spiritual experience as well. But if we're not being those role models, how the heck can we ever expect them to know and navigate these things? So how do we start as women to develop friendships in adult years? That seems very difficult sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because again, I think sometimes we do carry, again, whether it's that expectation that, oh, I don't have a bestie or I've never had a bestie, so there's something wrong with me. Or, yeah, as you say, I've been burned. So I think for a lot of women, there is a lot of fear about putting themselves out there. So my kind of approach to friendship, which can sometimes seem a little bit cold, but I think it's actually really useful, is, getting very clear on your categories of friends. Because I think the problem with the bestie concept, and again, if you do have a bestie and you guys are everything to each other, awesome. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I think, though, it's very rare, to have one person really meet all of those needs for you.
I saw a few memes too lately. It was like when you're trying to break up your bestie with their new boyfriend or something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare, but at the same time, do you think that's healthy?
Again, I think if the relationship is like healthy itself, sure. But what I find with a lot of women, particularly who are maybe in the same social group since high school or in a university. So this is what I typically see is, there's a group of 3 to 5 women. They have a lot of shared history together. There's a set of besties in there. And they've gone through all of these milestones together and all of these experiences. And here they are in their 30s. And those relationships don't feel good anymore, because maybe they, because unfortunately, sometimes we can kind of get stuck in those dynamics. And again, that's not to say that all friendship groups that started in high school or university are going to get stuck, but sometimes they can.
And sometimes, like, I found it very difficult when I started having children, and I had children pretty early on, when my friends were actually just entering their 20s and like living their best life. And I was like, oh my God, I just reversed this a little bit. Some of them stuck around, some of them did not. And that's okay. But I noticed that was very difficult for me because, our relationship dynamic changed where I was one person in that relationship and then someone else, needed me. So then I, changed. And the same with like once you get married and everything. And I find as you change and evolve, you really notice, are those people okay with this? Or is there like some anger and resentment that I'm actually shifting and growing?
Yeah. And again, I think that's a really hard thing for people to acknowledge when they've outgrown relationships, because we often have this expectation that friendships are forever. When we start dating someone, in the back of our head, we know that maybe this relationship may not work out. Whereas we don't seem to have that same mindset with friendships. It's like, boom, we're friends. This is forever.
Yeah. Well, it's like a death. It really is like the grieving process, which I don't think anyone ever talks about because we know that when the physical body is gone, okay, like they're never coming back and we have to live with that grief and process that grief. But people don't talk a lot about grief when people are still alive. How does that play into, again, like women developing other relationships?
Yeah. So I think that absolutely grief, it's a whole other topic and society gets totally wrong. But absolutely, when sometimes we don't want to acknowledge we've drifted in a friendship. And if you look at the logic, it's like, if I look at the evidence, we haven't talked in like 2 years, we haven't seen each other in 5, but I'm still clinging on to this friendship because I don't want to acknowledge that it's ended. And it doesn't have to be this big dramatic, like, I don't like you anymore. You don't like me. Like, I think sometimes being grateful for that friendship in that time in your life. I think absolutely people come into our lives, kind of in seasons for a reason. And there's some other one, I don't know. And then
great at paraphrasing that quote, by the way.
and just being grateful that we've had those experiences together. We brought something to each other's lives, and then our paths part ways. And it doesn't have to be something, again, dramatic or awful. But sometimes it can be dramatic and awful, which again is, I think sometimes Also, what we don't like to talk about is that sometimes we end up in relationships or friendships and stay in them way too long because there's no how-to manual on how to get out of a negative relationship, particularly if that person is kind of integrated into our lives.
So let's talk about that. Let's go back a few. You were talking about categories.
Mm-hmm. So I think, and again, as humans, our brains put things into categories because we have so much information. We have so many things that we have to keep track of. So this is just something that our brain does automatically. Like food. Although recently on your Instagram story, I did see you having broccoli for breakfast. So you broke the food category.
Why? I love broccoli. I usually have like broccoli or asparagus or something, but that's like a new thing. I just really crave vegetables and I don't like eating breakfast food.
Yes. But again, traditionally, we kind of have these categories of this is breakfast food, this is lunch food, this is, dinner food. And then we go all crazy having like breakfast for dinner.
I know. It's like, oh my gosh, it's so special.
Yeah. So similarly for friendships, and again, this actually, it may sound cold, but I think it actually helps our friendships because then we can set much more realistic expectations of each other. And then we don't expect things that we're probably not going to get out of those friendships. So thinking of like, yeah, these are the women that I went to high school with. And we did like all the stupid shit together. And we saw each other through our awkward teenage phases. And we experienced all of these firsts. And 20 years later, now my expectation of them is I see them, once every 1 to 2 years. We catch up, we reminisce, and then we go off and live our lives until we do that again. But I'm not going to be like sitting there being like, oh, why don't they call me every day? Or, why didn't I know this about them at that reminisce? Because it's like, well, because you don't actually keep in touch, So being very realistic about because friends, it's this like kind of big, broad label, but there's different types of friendship. Or here's my friends that I talk business with. These are the women that, if I'm looking into, going into a group coaching program, these are the women I'm going to talk to. These are the women that I can call up and be like, oh my gosh, I'm having a money freak out. And they're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And you know what?
I'm also going to do do I want to call the friends that are going to tell me what I really need to hear that I'm not going to like, or the friends that are just going to be like, oh, honey, it's okay.
Yeah. It's like, do I need a head pat or do I need an ass kick? So then you kind of categorize your friends. And again, I know sometimes I can like feel people's resistance to that idea of like putting people into categories. But honestly, it works so well because, and then I think it really, when you're with that person, that you really get to enjoy them for what they bring into your life versus feeling like, oh, like what's going on with this friendship? Or like, I'm not like, why don't they know this about me? Because I'm not going to go to my high school friends and talk to them about my practice or, my kind of, this is the content I'm like, because again, they love me and they're super supportive, but, they're just going to kind of nod and smile at me. And then I'm not going to get what I need maybe in that moment.
So this is a bit of an aha moment for me because I hear so many women saying, like, actually, so I'm kind of going back to the beginning of the conversation of seeking that not the validation, but that emotional, trying to get their partners to fill that emotional void for them. And they're like, well, my husband can't be everything for me. And I'm like, he shouldn't be. Like, that is not his role. Right. Mm-hmm. But also I hear a lot of women saying, I don't have the connection that I'm seeking in my life. And I have friends, but sometimes they're just not fulfilling anymore, or it's just not intellectual enough or whatever. And it's okay, right? Like that's a sign that growth is happening. And it doesn't mean you have to get rid of people. You're just evolving, and so are your relationships. So, like I have little pockets of people all over the place. But what I notice is that a majority of my life, like, it's either business or it's parenting. And those are the people I surround myself with because that's just my current season of my life. It doesn't, if I was like retired or, empty nesting or something else is going on in my life, I'm sure I'm going to attract those types of people in my life as well. So, I'm not attending, my youngest is 6, my boys are 6, 9, and 14. So I'm not going through like the pregnancy phase or the adoption phase or, infancy and all of that. So I'm not attending these mommy groups and stuff. So I can see how things have evolved and changed over the years, just dependent on life cycle. So when one, I'm hearing, okay, so we have to identify where we're attempting to get our emotional needs fulfilled. And probably 9 out of 10 times there's going to be a lack component in there of like their cup, just like some other areas of their life are going to be sucked dry of like, my husband can't be everything to me. Why not? So what I'm hearing you say is that the male brain and the female brain are very different when it comes to connection and friendship.
And we're also socialized differently, which
right.
again is a whole other conversation.
You're like, I got
so many conversations.
Lots of science. Okay, so let's talk about I know everyone's going to be like, well, I need some practical strategies. So how do we start to make friends?
Okay, so first, go through the friends you already have. Because again, often I feel like we're like, crap, I have to go meet all of these new people. Where again, well, we're on Facebook. Open up your friends list because there's a good chance there's someone in that list that maybe you haven't talked to for years that may actually meet a current need now. And so that's, how we're talking about, we have to acknowledge that our partners can't meet every need. So first for yourself, reflect like, what needs do I have that aren't being met? So is it that, I want to have conversations about business. I want to connect with someone who, I can just call up and say, hey, let's go for a walk. Or basically getting really clear, like, just like we kind of talk about doing exercises for like your ideal life and what does that look like? What would be an ideal friendship for you in this moment of your life?
That's interesting. I've thought about this in the business sense of like, I started a meetup because I was craving connection with other women in business. But I never thought it on a personal level.
Yes, absolutely. So doing what is my ideal day in my personal life. I know a lot of women who are looking for partners will often write out, what would my ideal partner look like, and kind of, in the woo-woo space, kind of putting it out into the universe that that's what they're trying to bring into their life. But we typically don't do that for friends. Like friendship often happens in this very random way. But sometimes it doesn't. It is this kind of like, we're just kind of waiting around for someone to materialize, but we haven't really gotten clear as to like, hey, why do I even want a friend? What need is that friendship going to need for me? And again, what would that friendship look like?
Okay, so if I have a personal need of, I just want a friend that I can go for walks with, and I ask somebody, and again, we have to be very wise or mindful of our expectations, because I notice this with people too, where they're like, well, you're my friend. Like I expect you to answer the phone when I call or when I text you. And I'm like, but I'm busy. Like, I have a full life and I'm not sitting on my phone all the time. So I'm just not, I can't be that person for you.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it feels like you're trying to wait each other out and ask like, oh, are they the type of person that's going to be like, yep, I can go for a walk right now? Or do we have to plan it a week in advance?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like, it is about our need, but we have to be open to the other person's needs as well.
Yeah. So yes, it's not all about us and our needs, that this person, and again, but that's why going back to this idea that friendships aren't, again, this lifelong commitment that, so someone that you may want to, again, have someone that goes on a walk, probably someone in your neighborhood, so being practical.
Put out some flyers.
Yes. Walking far. Well, but that's the thing, I think this is where women kind of get stuck, is they feel like they have to start from ground zero, that they have like, that they just have to find this new person in their life.
Right.
Whereas that person may already exist, but you just haven't put them into that context. Or, if you think about it in kind of like that dating mindset of like, hey, do you happen to know anyone? So again, like a lot of the business things that we know, like, and I know sometimes networking can be a dirty word, but connecting with other people, introducing people to one another, asking for an introduction or a connection. These things could be applied to friendship.
Interesting.
But again, going back to like the practical side. So go to your friends list and start looking through your friends list, because I recently had an experience where I was going into Toronto for a conference, and I met up for dinner with a high school friend, and we did this about 2 years ago again and really from the time of when we graduated undergrad to about 2 years ago, like we were Facebook friends, we, would occasionally message. But 2 years ago, she sent me a message. Again, she knows what I do for a living and just wanted to ask me something. And we totally reconnected, So I didn't have to go find a new friend. We just kind of circled back to each other. So thinking that there's probably friends that you've drifted away from. And again, not because of something negative or dramatic, but that's just maybe where life took you. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's an opportunity there to come back. And I find that people usually, are quite receptive. Like, so when my high school friend reached out to me a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, this is so, it totally took me back to when we were sitting in her bedroom listening to Madonna CDs.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah. And sometimes like I still live in the same town I grew up in. So I look at some people that I went to high school with that I never had a connection with, and now we actually have a connection just because of life cycles or interests and things like that. Okay. So what about getting involved in activities? People, I know in the wellness space, there's a lot of opportunity for community and connection. So, if you're going to a yoga studio or a fitness studio or a gym, depending on what type of gym it is, there's a big sense of connection and community there. Mm-hmm. So I almost find like it's that 20 seconds of insane courage just to get outside of your comfort zone and be like, hey, you show up every day, people get to know you on the surface, but maybe you're like, oh, I'm going to a concert next weekend. Like, do you want to go with me? Is this something you're interested in? Do you want to go for coffee? Like, it's just taking it like that one little step further. Do you have any feedback or suggestions for that?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think sometimes, going back to, our childhood relationship, so proximity and frequency. So putting yourself in situations where you're seeing people on a regular basis. But again, we also want to be really careful of setting our expectations that just because we click with someone does not mean they are our bestie right away. Because, just like dating, coming on too strong or maybe feeling overly familiar, like, hey, we're in the same yoga class, like, want to go away for the weekend? I rented this cottage, that might throw someone off, you know,
Right.
or who knows, maybe she would be like, that sounds awesome. And boom, you've met your soulmate. And great. But, you know, we have to really look at this as building a relationship. We're not just going to dive right into the deep end of friendship.
Okay. So it's really identifying your needs, seeing what is around you, where you've already actually built the foundational relationship with somebody, and then asking the uncomfortable question, which is, hey, you know, do you want to go for coffee? Or we haven't talked in a while and I have no expectations. I'm just lonely as fuck and I need a friend.
Well, you may not want to frame it that way. But at the same time, though, you know, because I know, you know, Brene Brown, vulnerability, authenticity is all the rage and has been for the last few years. But she's also very careful. And I think people miss that part where you don't want to be vulnerable and authentic with people that haven't earned that. You know, so again, that's why not diving right into the deep end of the pool. But I think still, you know, dipping a toe into the pool of authenticity and true connection, you know, because if you go out for coffee with someone and they spend the entire time, you know, talking about how amazing their life is and how they're going on this vacation and they bought this thing, and like, you can be like, yeah, this is not what I'm looking for. Again, so you're not committed just because you go out for coffee.
Awesome. You just have to put yourself out there.
Yes. And of course it's scary. And so that's why I think kind of going through people in your existing circle can feel less scary than being like, oh shit, I have to like first show up somewhere. Find somewhere to show up to, then show up, and then like peel myself off the side of the room because I'm so terrified, and then be like, hey, want to be friends?
I have my necklace with me. Do you want the best or the friend part? Which one?
You know, so having realistic, and again, I think also as adults, we do have other things in our lives. So when we're kids, like, you know, our lives aren't very big.
Right.
So we can put all of our attention and focus on our bestie. You know, whereas when you're balancing it with, you know, a business and a partner and children and aging parents and all of this, having realistic expectations that it's going to take time for that friendship to grow, and it's going to take more effort, you know, both on your part and the other person's part. And sometimes things that maybe feel hurtful or like we're being rejected actually have nothing to do with us.
Yeah, I think that's a big one because I know in my life, I've felt that, or people have felt that from me, and it's not personal. It's like I'm actually going through something and I'm just starting to create space, like for my own sanity and well-being. And yeah, and then people take it personally. It's like, it's not personal. It's just like, I'm going to lose my fucking shit. And if I don't create space, like I got to get back to the basics because you're in survival mode. And so, yeah, it's a gentle reminder that when we think someone is distancing themselves, it could be us, or it's like, well, it could be us, it could be them, it could just be transformation. But sometimes the person is struggling, and it's an opportunity to reach out. And I think this goes back to so much of like life skills and personal development, which is, you know, positive communication and just saying, hey, what's up? Like something has shifted. If it's, you know, time to go our ways, that's fine. But just always circling back and seeking that. And at the core of this conversation is honoring what we need. And that one person cannot be everything for us. They cannot do everything for us. They cannot provide all the emotional needs. I think it's really, really important that we provide that for ourselves too. And when I'm reflecting on my own kind of past with friendships and relationships, I remember like putting up ads on Kijiji, not paid ads, just free ads, for friends, like teen moms. I actually started like a teen mom meetup when I had my son. And Kijiji's like Craigslist for all you Americans that have no idea what I'm talking about. And it was really interesting. I met some like amazing people through that. And some of them were still in contact via Facebook and, we'll message back and forth, but we haven't seen each other in a while. But it was a really interesting time because we were all seeking that. And like when you take the lead and you create what you need in your life, you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. So, and again, I love that, it's being bold. It's putting yourself out there. It's, knowing that someone, like no one may reply to this ad at all. I
was hanging out with myself at the park.
And that's the thing, that is a risk. But, oh my gosh, the amazing things that could come of it. So similarly, I did not put an ad. I joined, so I have almost 11-year-old twins. So I joined the London Multiple Birth Association and met 4 other women, and we had twins all within about 3 or 4 months of each other. So, for the first, 2 or 3 years of my kids' lives, like those were my people. When we were on mat leave, we met every week. We got together all the time. For the first, I think, 5 years, we'd have an annual kind of photo shoot with all the kids, and we intermingled families and partners. And then as the kids got older, and they got their own friends and their own activities, that kind of got less frequent. And then just the moms would meet. And I think the last time I had them all over was sometime last year. And it was amazing. And we had so much fun. And again, it's not that anything dramatic happened. We all just kind of went our own ways, but we're all still there. And we still, again, we're the holders of each other's history for that time in our life. And that's amazing.
Interesting. Oh, life is so beautiful and yet so tragic all at once. And everything is temporary. Mm-hmm. That's what we have to realize. The emotion that we're feeling is temporary. The relationships, people, places, things. And this just kind of wraps it up to, what is the life you want to be living? Mm-hmm. Are we going to be stuck in expectation, or are we going to be, just open to possibilities? Mm-hmm. So thank you. So Agnes, what do you have coming up? Where can people find you?
So if you're in the London area,
come in for some therapy.
Come in for some therapy. I have some amazing clinicians on my team, but really the thing that I'm most on fire about is my new project. It's called Screw Expectations. So people can check it out at screwexpectations.com. I'm not going to lie right now. There's just a couple of blog posts on there.
Be bold. Start somewhere.
But again, imperfect action.
Yeah.
People can find me on Instagram, which again, also imperfect because I've never used Instagram before. So I kind of feel like a grandparent trying to figure out FaceTime. I'm like, I thought Instagram.
There's no FaceTime on Instagram.
No, I know that. I'm using like an analogy. But there's stories. I'm like, what the hell are stories? Why are they only like 10-second bits? Anyways, so I'm just kind of over there sharing, little expectations that need to be screwed, things that I'm reading that's inspiring me, because I really, really want this to be a movement for all women who are fed up, who, are having their own awakening that so much of the programming that they have received is total bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's harmful. Often when I'm like, where did this expectation come from? Usually the patriarchy. Mm-hmm. So we have a lot of harmful expectations to undo. And I just want to be one of the voices that's part of that conversation. And I want so many more voices to be a part of that conversation. So come hang out with me on Instagram. I don't know what I'm doing, but
and watch you grow. So on Instagram, is it Screw Expectations as well?
It is.
Okay. So you're easy to find.
I'm easy to find.
Well, thank you. This was a lovely conversation.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to continue growing our relationship. Slow and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. But this is the beautiful thing about personal development, especially when you're working in personal development, is you're typically surrounded with other people who are, most are healthy and like-minded. And you begin to realize that when you're living in alignment with how you want to feel and your work is in alignment with that, you meet people that you would want to hang out with outside of work. And I think it's just another kind of positive affirmation that, life can feel good. And there were points in my life where I had to keep telling myself that, like, it should feel good. It should feel good. The whole point of life is joy. And some days don't feel joyful or great, but when you can get back to that space where you're like, this is awesome, this is great, you're on the right track. So I'm so grateful that we met, Agnes. And
as well.
Continue this conversation. And ladies, go check out her blog at screwexpectations.com. I think that is just a lifesaver.